In the past 18 months, Africa has seen changes that probably were long overdue. I at least counted 3 heads of state who had been in power for more than 30 years, who left office. But most importantly, I think if we are talking Africa, there is one place that's literally and figuratively the center of the universe. Literally and figuratively. Literally because GMT meets the equator in that country, and that's the DRC. And figuratively because most of the problems, Major General, that Africa faces would be halved immediately if the DRC could be stable. I'm saying most of the country's problems would be halved because the DRC shares a border with 9 other countries. And those countries are in the east, in the west, in the south, and in the north. Therefore, when you have problems in the DRC, you have problems in 10 countries minimum. And 10 countries out of 54 is a huge chunk. And as I see, especially because of the size of the DRC. Now, the DRC became independent in 1960, and I apologize for this brief history lecture. 1960. And when it gained independence, it had been ruled by the King of Belgium, King Leopold II. But it's not the king I'm interested in, it's the army he had set up, called Force Publique. And if you talk about military ombud and protecting people about brutality or any kind of hostility or inhumane treatment, I think we need a crash course on Force Publique and what they used to do to enforce the reign of King Leopold II. They cut people's limbs. They cut their arms. They cut their legs. They killed them not for threatening security or stability of a country or threatening the monarchy or for attacking anybody. They would do all that to enforce the production quota on the rubber plantations. So you don't meet your quota for the day, you get punished, but to make sure your punishment is understood permanently, cutting your arm would be a good idea. So everybody would get the message. Now, I went to a school when if you didn't get certain answers right, you were punished. And sometimes you get cuts according to how many answers you got wrong. So being bright was not just a nice to do, it was a survival skill. And we would have a poem, like Amakeya, you know, and this guy from the Berge, Bospasketan. Had some like 18 stanzas, that poem. I don't know what Fesser was trying to do. And my mates would get only stanza number 1. And you would have this Force Publique of a teacher who would say, for every stanza you miss is 1 cut. Now you have 18 stanzas and you only know 1. You got 17 on your cushions. If you're lucky. Some of them would hit you like that. They would say, give me your fingers, and they would crush them. The point I'm trying to make here is, often we talk about Africa, Advocate, and we say the brutality of this continent. How can people do this to others? But if at one stage your survival depended on you enforcing the will of Force Publique in the Congo, and you either cut your colleague's hand or yours was cut. And as you know, the DRC became independent in 1960 and never knew peace until very recently, if you can call that peace. So the point I'm trying to make here is, when we say African context, General, we have to get it proper and we get it right. You know, facts are not negotiable. Facts don't depend on the mood or temperature or the weather. Facts are not in dispute, they are facts. Military precision, facts. So the context that we are talking about is that transition, where we are moving from countries like Angola, countries like DRC, countries like Zimbabwe, that are shifting from an era that lasted more than 3 decades, and now suddenly people find themselves in a certain era where they have to operate in a different context, and that context has implications, especially because of things like this, cell phones and technology of information, where it would be easy to suffer in brutality on people and get away with it. Now, and I saw it in Zimbabwe, I saw it in the DRC, where people take videos of what is happening, and they are able to share the information and hard evidence. So all of a sudden, an era that overlaps with that brutality I mentioned coincides with a change that is sudden and a technology that makes reporting and sharing data on the behavior that needs to be regulated a lot more expedient. And we don't have institutions to enforce that. So, Deputy Minister, we're talking about Word Perfect. And people are at Windows 4.0. Because the problems we're facing are Windows 4.0, but we are still in the mindset of Word Perfect and DOS and Home Send.